Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, I'm here in Brussels, where I have to tell you, people are still in denial. They still don't think it's going to happen. We're not really going to trigger Article 50 and signal our intent to leave the European Union, are we? That's what they asked me. Well, tomorrow at 12:30 UK time, the British ambassador will deliver a letter, the Article 50 letter, to Donald Tusk, who is the chairman of the European Council. It is going to happen tomorrow. But ahead of that, there was a big television debate on Question Time last night with protagonists from both the Leave camps and the Remain camps. And perhaps a little bit of a surprise, in a way, that David Davis, who is the Brexit secretary, somebody that I shared platforms with up and down the country during the referendum, and seemed to be one of the tough guys, but when he was asked what would happen to immigration after Brexit, this is what he said.
The first issue here is to bring this back under the control of the UK government, the UK Parliament, to bring migration under control. I don't think most people oppose migration. I think most people are in favour of migration so long as it's managed. And the point is, it will need to be managed. Now, my job is to bring the job back, and it's for the Home Secretary to decide what the policy will be. But I cannot imagine that the policy will be anything other than that which is in the national interest, which means that from time to time we'll need more and from time to time we'll need less migrants. That's how it will no doubt work. And that will be in everybody's interest, the migrants and the citizens of the United Kingdom. What it will be is whatever the government judges to be sustainable.
So the tens of thousands which the Tory party has gone on about for a long time no longer applies
I think we'll get there. But the simple truth is that we have to manage this properly. You've got industries dependent on migrants, you've got social welfare, you've got the National Health Service. You have to make sure they continue to work.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. The Brexit tough nut is giving way. He's saying that actually it's quite possible that if the national interest, as determined by the Conservative government, thinks that we need more immigration, that the numbers might actually go up. So last night, I appealed to Remain voters to call in. Tonight, I'm appealing to Leave voters. If immigration does increase post-Brexit, would you feel betrayed? And if you think you would feel betrayed, then call me on 0345 6060 973. If for you it wasn't an issue, you voted out for different reasons, then text me on 84850. If you think it really is absolutely fine for immigration to rise post-Brexit, then of course you can tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage and LBC. You can watch us live on Facebook, and for the first time, we're going to have a Twitter poll. Yes, we are. The question, I'll repeat, if immigration does increase, would you feel betrayed? And let me know what you think at Nigel_Farage. And that Twitter poll will run until right up towards the end of the programme. The poll will close at 7:50. I'm going to go to John in Formby. John, I presume you were a Leave voter. How do you feel about David Davis's statement last night?
Oh, well, another betrayal, I think. We're getting used to it. I mean, back in the late 70s, I think it was Bob Mellish, a Labour MP, said of immigration, enough is enough. And it goes on and on and on. And the establishment doesn't want to do anything about it, whereas the majority of the people want it controlled.
But surely, John, one of the things about the Brexit referendum was that it did give people the chance to express their opinion. And I don't know what you think, but my view was that immigration dominated the reason that people voted above everything else.
Yes. But the establishment doesn't want to let go of it for some reason. I can understand with Labour, and I gather Diane Abbott has gone off piste fairly recently, and she wants freedom of movement.
Oh, yes.
It all seems part of this conspiracy to keep us in the Union and keep things as they were in the status quo.
Could it be, John, they're playing softball on this in order to get a better trade deal? Is that perhaps their thinking?
That may well come into it, but it's not what the people want.
No.
They've got to sell this to the British public. And if immigration is going to continue at the ludicrous levels, what was the point of the referendum?
Well, then I think, John, I would probably have to agree with you, and I think there would be a further reckoning, and if 2016 was a big shock in British politics. If we're let down on this issue, I suspect that we might get even bigger ructions in British politics in the years to come. John, you're perfectly clear you would see this as a betrayal. What does Shahid in Hemel Hempstead think? Good evening.
Yeah, hi. Look, I voted to leave, and immigration was one of the reasons, but not for quite the same reasons as you and the last caller. One key point that's left down is that when it comes to non-EU migrants, they're not permanent. Hear that, everybody. They're not permanent. They're here on visas up to 5 years. I myself, British-born, married to somebody from Pakistan, I'm not allowed to bring her over here until I get profits of at least 18,000. And in my job, that means having to have a gross income of nearly 30,000. I'm a taxi driver in the competitive world of taxi driving. Difficult, achievable, but difficult to get. Okay? And that is an overriding reason. Lots of other very good reasons. I don't think the EU works at all. I don't like the single currency and, half in, half out, all that kind of stuff. No federal government. It's all over the place. But I do not like the bias for EU citizens. They can come and go as they like.
Yes.
They can bring in non-EU spouses themselves. A Frenchman can bring in a Pakistani wife. I can't. It's crazy. But please hear that point. The non-EU migrants, I pick up workers from India. They work for Amazon. They work for Dixon's Carphone. And they are here on 5-year visas. After 5 years, they have to go back home, and then they have to reapply if they want to come back after 2 years. And that's heavily enforced. So don't go around...
And that's, Shahid, if they get permission, because some of the evidence we're getting is that people from New Zealand and people from India and elsewhere who perhaps do have suitable skills have found it quite difficult over the course of the last few years to get in because of the open door to Southern and Eastern Europe. And
another key point, Nigel, is that the two older generations, the baby boomers and their parents, the Queen and Prince Charles, think of them. The Queen was born around about 1926, Prince Charles around about 47, 48. They are the two oldest generations, and since 2011, the baby boomers have been retiring. They're going to be retiring well into the 2030s, and there's not enough of my generation who were born in the 70s to replace them. So with 500,000 people dying every single year in the UK, I think the migration figures balance out because they're not all permanent. If they were permanent, then there'd be a question mark. But as soon as we leave, I basically want EU citizens to be subjected to the same rules as non-EU.
Fine.
But I think people like me should be subjected to harsh rules.
No, I get that. You're looking for fairness in terms of migrants coming from all over the world and to end the open door to the European Union, and that's why you voted leave. Shahid, you could not be clearer. Thank you for that. Pauline in Bethnal Green, how would you feel if post-Brexit immigration figures actually rose?
Well, I don't know. I can't see it rising. I admit perhaps staying the same for a short time, but I think the difference is, just like the previous caller said, is that post-Brexit, they would have to have a work visa to come here, and that includes people who are from EU countries. They would have to have a work visa. It wouldn't be permanent. You can't just live here permanently just because you live in Europe, and you can't come here and immediately start voting.
Well,
and also, I'd like
Pauline,
to think that
Pauline, that's fine, but why didn't David Davis make that clear to us last night?
I don't know. Maybe he wasn't on the ball. I don't know.
What, do you mean the Brexit secretary wasn't on the ball on BBC television? I mean, what a terrible thing to say.
But I mean, I voted leave, Nigel, and one of the reasons I voted leave, living in London, is that I'm fed up of the amount of people living here who don't speak English, and the amount of people begging on the streets as well, who are from the EU and who are allowed to come here with no job, no skills, no nothing. And I think that is really wrong, and there's so much of it. And living in London, you're surrounded by it. You barely hear the English language spoken here at the moment. And I would like to think that post-Brexit, you'd get a better calibre of migrant.
Right, so Pauline, your view is that we don't face a huge increase in immigration post-Brexit because we'll put in place a work permit system and people will need a good reason, a trade or a skill to bring. Pauline, I hope you're right that is the kind of system we put in place. And I hope that Shahid's point, who rang before you, is right, that we treat people from all over the world exactly the same. I just don't think that's what I was hearing from David Davis last night, and that worries me. Pauline, I thank you, and we're going to go quickly to Ben in Wolverhampton. Ben, if immigration numbers go up, would you feel betrayed?
Of course I would. Very good evening to you, Nigel. How are you doing?
Good evening. Well, I was doing well, and I like David Davis, and I've campaigned with him. And suddenly, he says this on Question Time.
Well,
I'm worried. I'm worried, Ben.
Nigel, the government that we've got in power at the moment, it's a lottery on what they're going to say on a daily basis. They hint one thing and say something else. They're very disjointed. One minister says one thing, a member of parliament says something else. Nobody knows where they stand. As you know, I represent quite a considerable Lithuanian community in Wolverhampton here. And unfortunately, what's happening on the street, and I'll tell you and your listeners that some of them have been here for 7, 8 and 9 years, and they're applying for residency and they're being refused. And that's not the stance that the government's taking, and I think it's disgraceful. Now, when we eventually get to leave the European Union, when the negotiations are finished, yes, we're all going to feel a little bit betrayed because the numbers probably will remain about the same, and that's not what we voted for, I don't think.
Well, Ben, I tell you what, if that's what happens, I think people are going to be very, very justifiably angry, and I thank you for your call. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC, live from Brussels, and it's 7:15.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
A unique way at looking at events tomorrow. It is, of course, the official Brexit day. But what will it be? Will it be like getting all those people together herding cats or even herding sheep?
Nick, I'm in a field in rural Northamptonshire with 28 sheep, and one of them is black to represent Britain. We've got the gate to the EU open. We've got 2 herds of sheep now. Come by, come by. I think we're really close to victory. Victory! Oh! Yes! We've done it, Nick. Britain now out on their lonesome.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton, now open in Aberdeen.
The family member who was concerned. The neighbour who felt uneasy. The teacher who was worried. The coach who noticed at practice. And you. Child abuse. If you think it, report it. Visit gov.uk/tackle child abuse to find out how. Together, we can tackle child abuse.
Did you know Ontario means beautiful water in Iroquoian? With over 250,000 freshwater lakes, it's no wonder. Book with Canadian Affair and plan your trip with their expert Canada know-how. Celebrate Canada's 150th birthday and save up to £200 per person. Plus, get £150 of holiday vouchers per couple, with holidays departing direct from London. Get your Canada know-how with CanadianAffair.com. Sale ends April 3rd.
Are you confused about PPI? At PPI Hotline, we want to give you the facts. There is absolutely every reason to check you had PPI. Even if you think you never have, we can help you find out, as you could be owed thousands. And now there's a deadline. We just need the name of the bank you've had loans or credit cards with, and we'll check for free. So find out now if you're owed by texting WIN to 83222.
PPI Hotline. Text WIN to 83222.
Highways England is here to improve your journey. Have you noticed the red X's above you when driving on the motorway? Think they're not important? Think again. They mean there's an obstruction or danger up ahead. So if you see one, you must change lanes safely to avoid a penalty, or even worse. So when you see a red X, it's there for a reason. For more information on red X's, search online for smart motorways.
Your business is growing. Fantastic. But you need to hire fast. Enter Indeed.com. Already used by over 3 million businesses for hiring. And with more people in the UK using Indeed than any other job site, you'll find more great candidates and sooner on Indeed. Find your next hire on the world's #1 job site, Indeed.com. Terms, conditions, quality standards and usage limits apply. World's #1 job site based on total unique visitors to Indeed.com.
I know how to avoid a soggy bottom. I know the name of cinema's most famous white shark. I know all the things you can do with a Maris Piper. And I definitely know the TV show that made this music famous. But I don't know my state pension.
There's a simple way to find out when you can get your state pension and how much it'll be. Search Your State Pension and get to know yours.
This This is LBC, live from Brussels, The Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Brexit boss David Davis says that post-Brexit immigration could go down, but it could equally go up. And I'm asking Leave voters tonight, if immigration does increase, would you feel betrayed? So let me know. If, you know, the reason you voted to leave was because of immigration and this makes you angry, then let me know. Maybe you voted for us to leave for completely different reasons and you're not worried in the least about the numbers of people coming into our country. Your texts and tweets coming in. Hello, Nigel. The reason for me voting out was solely because of open borders and immigration. You asked if I'd feel betrayed. Then yes, says Steve the cabbie. Hi, Nigel. I voted to leave. I'm happy for immigration numbers to rise as long as our country has control about who we let in and can treat all nations fairly, says Paul in Brockley. That point about fairness, Paul, made by Shahid, a previous caller. If immigration goes up after Brexit, the Tory government will be toast, comes in an anonymous tweet. I'm going to go to Jack in Hampton. Jack, if you were a Leave voter, if these numbers really did go up, would you feel betrayed?
Yeah, I'm a big fan, by the way, just so you know. Basically, yeah, I'd be absolutely disgusted. I purely voted based on immigration and sovereignty. And already one of those looks like it's possibly going to be thrown out the window. And I think, realistically, what we need to be doing is something similar to what the US, well, the executive order that's been trying to be pushed through in terms of a ban on certain nations. But also, should we not be looking to do something like what they've currently got in place in terms of like an H-1B visa for skilled workers that require sponsorship? Although, yeah, Canadian visas, their entry system, express entry, is points-based. It goes quite well for them. Plus, Australia kind of works for them. We've already been told it won't work for us. So surely something like what the US has in place now would work.
Well, there are lots of ways that this can work, Jack. You know, the Australians do it their way, and as you say, the Canadians do it their way. I think the main reason we voted to leave is we wanted control back of our country, its laws, and its borders. And the borders were the biggest part, I think, the biggest motive that helped to get... 2.5 million people voted in that referendum who had not voted in the previous general election, and a big majority of those did so because of this question. So, you know, you used the word disgusted. I suspect a lot of people would feel disgusted. And I'm just a bit mystified, Jack, why would David Davis, you know, change the whole emphasis of this literally 48 hours before we trigger Article 50? And it sort of feels to me like, you know, the Mayor of London has been in Brussels today, and there's going to be a big Brexit debate will take place in the European Parliament next week, and we'll have all the chief negotiators and Mr. Juncker, and they'll all be there. And I just wonder whether the pressure on the government, you know, she keeps being told, whether it's the food processors, the supermarkets, the city, she keeps being told we have to have at all costs a free trade deal. Well, we don't, but that's ideally what people want. And I wonder whether we're preparing to concede on fishing and perhaps even on immigration numbers as a means to get that free trade deal. And if we do that, I'd have to ask myself, was it really worth voting to leave? That's how I feel, Jack. That's how I feel, Jack, you know.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'm thinking about, okay, so what's going to happen with the likes of Gibraltar? And also, the main thing that we need is essentially a passporting deal. But the rest of the world trade on WTO terms. So where people are going, oh my God, hard Brexit, how is that actually a bad thing?
It is hysterical, because it wouldn't be a disaster and it would leave us free to do what we want with anybody else in the world. Jack, I thank you. And to remind people, you know, I am having my first ever Twitter poll on LBC on this. I'm asking you that if immigration does increase post-Brexit, would you feel betrayed? And you can vote at Nigel_Farage. The polls close in about 25 minutes' time, and I will give you the results towards the end of the programme. Your Facebook messages. Linda says, why are people against visas? It works for Australia and Canada. Half of my family are now Canadian citizens. They had to go through the right channels to live there. I don't think anybody, Linda, would necessarily fight you on that point. Ricky says, do many Brits living in Benidorm speak fluent Spanish? Is it fair to expect the same over here of immigrants? Ricky, you're quite right, actually. You know, the British abroad are not always really integrating and perhaps quite the way they should be, but the point would be that not many of them are actually there taking jobs and perhaps driving down the cost of local people's wages. A lot of people living in Benidorm are retired and are there spending their pensions. Craig says on Facebook, if the Conservatives get this wrong, Theresa May as PM will be short-lived. The second dark threat we've had this evening. I wonder what Andy in Cardiff feels. Andy, as a Leave voter, would you feel betrayed if immigration numbers went up, or wouldn't it matter to you?
I'd feel absolutely devastated if the immigration numbers went up instead of down. However, I'd like to put a different spin on the story as well, if I may. I don't believe that David Davis should have even been on Question Time. I think that was a huge error. You said earlier that you'd actually done some work alongside him, so you kind of knew how he worked and knew him. You'll know from that he kind of puts his integrity above all else, above his party, above his political life and everything else. And I think that putting him on Question Time was a huge error in that he tried to answer honestly, then had to bite his tongue. And I think what he was trying to do was say, it could go up, it could go down, and being politically correct rather than being honest. And that hurt him in other people's opinions. You mean he doesn't want to sort of go against the general tide of political correctness? Is that what you're saying? That's what I'm saying, but I think that when it comes to negotiating, it's going to be a different story altogether. But the mistake in putting him on Question Time in the first place, you don't put your chief negotiator on a show where you know he's going to be bombarded with questions about what he's going to say, what he's going to do, and what he's going to negotiate. So, David Davis, if you're listening, Andy in Cardiff says you should have kept your powder dry and not got yourself really twisted up over this immigration question. Andy, I think you're making a very, very powerful point. But as you say, you would be devastated if numbers went up. The previous caller said they would be disgusted. I thank you, Andy, very much for your points. On Facebook, Simon says, you voted for Brexit, not immigration. Is that right, Nigel? Well, it was part of it, wasn't it? Part of getting back control of the country was getting back control of our borders, and the numbers that have been coming in from both inside and outside the EU have, frankly, over the last 20 years, been too high. Dean says, it's a fact that if we want a points-based immigration system, the immigration actually would rise as more people globally would be eligible. Dean, that depends where you set the barrier, and it also depends whether you put a cap in place. And that is how this whole debate with David Davis started last night, because Dimbleby asked him, was he in favour of a cap on the number of EU migrants? Then he said very clearly no, and then we got on to that our post-Brexit immigration policy would be that whatever the government judges to be sustainable, and you can read that in any way that you like. And, you know, our last caller made the point, perhaps wiser for David Davis not to have accepted the invitation and gone on that programme, because a lot of people who've been looking up to David Davis, I'm one of them. As I say, I campaign with him, I share platforms with him, and there is just this slight sense of unease ahead of this big historic triggering of Article 50 tomorrow amongst the Leavers. Andrew in Ealing, good evening. Would you feel let down if immigration numbers went up?
Well, I would be disappointed, but I think you're completely incorrect on this. I'm a Leave voter. I think immigration at these levels is completely unsustainable. I do want a reduction in immigration, but I voted Leave to take back control, and it's up to our government or prospective government to put a manifesto forward about what they're going to do on immigration. And I think thanks to you, we can, in future, or we will be able to hold our government to account on immigration. But I think David Davis was absolutely right last night. The Brexit vote, and I voted Leave to take control back. I didn't give anybody the mandate to reduce immigration. It is what I would be wanting. But yes, I get that. I get that, Andrew. You make the big point that it was about control, and obviously control of our borders was a key part of it. But don't you think that with the British public that had been told in the general election before Cameron became Prime Minister that if he became the boss,
we'd reduce it to tens of thousands a year. We saw Theresa May as Home Secretary talking about big cuts to non-EU migration. Don't you think it would be a fair and reasonable assumption for those who voted to leave to expect to see immigration numbers fall pretty sharply?
No, I don't.
All right, fair enough.
It was about taking back control and then being able to hold our government to account. That we do not control our borders currently. And thanks to you, in all honesty, the referendum occurred. But it is about now our government and future governments setting policy that's right for the country and what the people decide. And I will vote to reduce immigration. There's no two ways about it. But that's
well, Andrew, my point is.
About.
But Andrew, my point is, in a previous speech in Lithuania a few weeks ago, David Davis suggested that free movement of people may well continue well into the 2020s. Now, that would be a betrayal, wouldn't it?
Oh, that would be a complete betrayal. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Andrew, I take your point. We did vote to give, sovereign parliaments the ability to make these decisions that we can judge at general elections. But I do actually believe that Leave voters had a realistic expectation of numbers falling. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30. Time for the news with Tim Humphrey.
The Scottish Parliament has backed Nicola Sturgeon's call for the powers to hold a second independence referendum. MSPs voted 69 to 59 to mandate the First Minister to seek permission from the UK government for a ballot to be held between autumn 2018 and spring 2019. A Royal Marine convicted of killing a wounded Taliban fighter could walk free from prison in a few weeks after his murder conviction was reduced to manslaughter. Sergeant Alexander Blackman has already served more than 3 years in jail after being found guilty of the shooting in Afghanistan. Police are still questioning 2 men arrested in Birmingham in connection with last week's attack at Westminster. A 32-year-old woman arrested in Manchester on Friday has been released on bail. LBC weather, a few showers this evening, but they will soon clear. Mild overnight at 10 degrees, dry with sunny spells tomorrow and a high of 16 degrees.
LBC Travel. Good evening, I'm Andy Lake. Well, starting off in Norbury, the A23 Streatham High Street is closed southbound and down to just one lane northbound. That's at Green Lane after a collision causing queues from Streatham Common North. The North Circular also queuing tonight westbound between the Neason Interchange and the Hanger Lane Gyratory, where 2 lanes are closed for emergency repairs to a burst water main. Into Hertfordshire now, the A10 in Cheshunt remains closed, heading away from London between College Road and Church Lane. That's for emergency resurfacing works after a fuel spillage. It's been causing bad delays all day. In Surrey, the A3 is solid heading into Guildford all the way from Putnam. There was a lane closed near the Wooden Bridge after a breakdown all day today. It's still taking about an hour to get through that queue, but all lanes look like they may have just reopened. Still horrible delays coming along the A31 and the B3000 because of this as well. Also long delays in Leicestershire this evening. There's a lane closed on the M69 northbound. That's because of a collision between Burbage and the M1 causing queues on the approach. For more real-time traffic updates, go to lbc.co.uk.
This is LBC.
I know what the plough looks like in the night sky. I know how Eskimos kiss. I know a time when a mullet wasn't a fish. And I definitely know this piece of music. But I don't know my state pension.
There's a simple way to find out when you can get your state pension and how much it'll be. Search Your State Pension and get to know yours.
Highways England is here to improve your journey. Have you noticed the emergency refuge areas along the motorway? You might have wondered what they're for. Not this.
I need the toilet.
Or this.
Are you tired? Do you want me to drive?
Or even this. Emergency refuge areas are on motorways for emergencies only. For more information on emergency refuge areas, search online for smart motorways.
Do you have a pension? Maybe you've got more than one. How do you know if they're in the right pension funds, making as much money as possible for your retirement? Answer is, you probably don't. At The Pension Works, our fully qualified independent financial advisors could add instant value to your retirement fund. Simply text the word YES to 83222 for your free Pension Works health check. That's YES to 83222 today. Your pensions working harder with The Pension Works.
Writing job descriptions, managing candidates, setting up interviews. Hiring's hard. But Indeed.com makes it easy. post your job, organise candidates, schedule interviews. All on the UK's #1 job site. And with more people in the UK using Indeed than any other job site, easy works. Find your next hire at Indeed.com today. Terms, conditions, quality standards and usage limits apply. UK's #1 job site based on total unique visitors to Indeed.com.
It started with a letter in the mail. And then another. That's when they started. Soon you hear her. And now you're just struggling and panicking and just, how did it get so bad? The more you hide from debt, the worse it becomes. Capitalise has been helping thousands of people across London manage their debt with free, impartial, face-to-face advice. Get help today at capitalise.org.uk.
The family member who was concerned. The neighbour who felt uneasy. The teacher who was worried. The coach who noticed at practice. And you. Child abuse. If you think it, report it. Visit gov.uk/tackle child abuse to find out how. Together, we can tackle child abuse.
This is LBC, live from Brussels, The Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag #FarageOnLBC.
Brexit boss David Davis said on Question Time last night that immigration numbers could even increase after Brexit. And I'm asking Leave voters tonight, we had Remainers ringing last night, I'm asking Leave voters, if immigration does increase, would you feel betrayed? And so far, I've had people telling me they'd be disappointed, disgusted, devastated. One caller made the point that actually all he was doing was voting to give the UK government control, and we'd vote on this in the future. And I get that point, but I think it was a realistic expectation of everyone that voted Brexit to expect to see the government to bring numbers down. And before we get to that, though, the breaking news this evening is that the Scottish Parliament have voted by 69 votes to 59 votes in favour of having another referendum. They want it to take place between the end of 18 and the spring of 19. Nicola Sturgeon says the vote must be respected. She wants to have a second independence referendum. And I don't know how many times I have to say, she would not be leading an independent country if, having left the United Kingdom, they joined the European Union and had their laws made somewhere else and foreign courts making decisions. So we're back to this question of would you as a Leave voter feel betrayed if immigration did increase? Rachel from Lancashire texts in to say, we need to get UK people to skill up before we rubber stamp endless immigration. Rachel, that is completely and utterly true. Why we have to have so many foreign nurses and doctors in Britain, well, I'll tell you why, because we're not training enough of our own. Another text here, I've been saying for a long time that the government will crumble when it gets to Brussels. I campaigned for Brexit. Reducing immigration was way on the top of my list. 300,000 net every year is madness, says Elaine. Let's get a view from the continent. Let's ask Gordon in the Netherlands what he makes of this question.
Good evening, Nigel. I found last night that after watching David Davis, that he was backpedalling on, I would say, the Brexit promise that they'd bring immigration way down. And it has to come way down. You can't fit too many people into an island. This is ludicrous. Now, if he goes back on his word, and which I've got a feeling Theresa May will go back on her word, just to appease the left wing, then that's going to bring a whole new ball game. We can't carry on like this. Every social system will break down in the future, from the NHS to social care to councils and etc. We can't.
Well, Gordon, it's not just the left wing they'd be appeasing. It's actually the big multinational businesses, because they love, don't they? They love open-door immigration because they want to keep wages as cheap as they possibly can. So there's pressure there too, isn't there?
Very true, Nigel. But I emigrated from the UK to the Netherlands. I couldn't hold my British identity and a Dutch identity because the Dutch here enforce that he has to give up one or the other. Now, I had to myself jump through hoops, and I mean literally hoops, to get my Dutch nationality. And from there off, as I'm seen as a Brit born, but with a Dutch nationality now, I am seen now as a third, lower class rated citizen. And now with the EU, now with the UK coming out of the EU, I'm in fear that I will get booted in the future back to the UK, because this is what this government is all about, and this is what David Davis is trying to block.
Well, I wonder also, Gordon, whether perhaps getting a free trade deal isn't so high on Theresa May's list that she's prepared to make a whole load of concessions elsewhere.
Well, she will backpedal to everything that Brexit stood for, that you fought blood, sweat and tears for, and all the campaigners out there up and down the UK fought for. But this is a subject that is touchy to everybody else. And with Alex Salmond sit there last night spitting fire and brimstone, we've got to have more immigration, we've got to have this, we've got to have that. We can't carry on with cheap labour, with labour that can't speak a word of English half the time, half of them we can't control, and that therefore the UK has to turn and say, stop, we're shutting our doors, we're having a rest period for at least 2 years, no more immigration, sort out the wheat from the chaff and have done. And then start an immigration process the same as Australia has, with a point system and with a...
No, I agree. No, I agree, Gordon. I agree. You feel very, very strongly about this. If they do let us down on this and a whole load of other issues, then we'll have to fight it all over again. A tweet here. Nigel, it was obvious that David Davis was referring to fluctuations in the demand requirements of UK PLC. Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? The emphasis here was we've got to think about industries, social welfare, the NHS, and who will do the work. And I would like to have seen the emphasis being on we're going to make sure we've got plenty of trained British people to do these jobs, so we don't need immigration running at its current numbers. It struck me it was the wrong way around. On Facebook, Jason charmingly says half the knuckle-draggers didn't have a clue what they were actually voting for with Brexit. That's right, Jason. We're all thick, stupid, and we very rarely wash. We are the idiots. And Tess responds to that by saying, I had every idea what I was voting for. Thank you. Well done, Tessa, for responding. As ever, on the Facebook page, when this programme is going on, there is a whole separate conversation going on there. Sometimes, not much of it, actually, are we able to tell the rest of you about, because passions are strong. Stuart in Cricklewood, would you feel betrayed if the immigration numbers went up?
No, I don't think I would.
Okay.
I voted for one reason. I wanted democracy. I wanted to know that I could kick out the people I didn't want trying to run the country. What we have at the moment is a European organisation which are only most of them are 20 years away from either being fascists or communists. They do not understand British democracy. And that's what we've given to the world, and that's what I'm proud of.
Yes. Well, Stuart, I completely understand and agree with that point. Democracy, self-government was absolutely at the heart of the whole Brexit argument, but the most important subset of it, in terms of the numbers that voted, was they desperately wanted control of our borders, didn't they?
Well, that's what I understand, but talking to friends and relatives who voted, none of them have put immigration at the top of their list. Immigration is important. We've got to respect the immigrants that are living here, because those working and making a living for themselves, they or their children are going to become the British citizens of the future. This has happened year after year after year, and those immigrants have become great British citizens.
So let me ask you, Stuart, I mean, given your basic democratic point, let's say Brexit does happen and happen properly. I'm beginning to ask myself, but let's say it does. At the next general election, would you be more likely or less likely to vote for a party that wanted to get net migration down from the current 350,000 to below 100,000 or not?
I suppose my gut feeling is I would like the immigration to come down, but not to the detriment of Britain as a whole. We have got, as somebody did say, we've got an aging population. We have got to try and train our own people. There are too many people who are just on the system and bleeding us. And they are the ones that we do not want in this country. And they may actually be British 2, 3, or 4 generations, and they haven't worked. I had a story.
Stuart, I absolutely am with you on that. And I think so many callers that I've had over the last few months say that actually our reliance on cheap foreign labour has meant we're not training enough of our own people with proper trades and skills. And I think that's a great shame. Stuart, your point that you voted for self-government and democracy is very well made. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Brussels, and it's 7:45.
Coming up at 8 on LBC, Clive Bull.
The Scottish Parliament has backed proposals for a second referendum on independence for Scotland. Is Theresa May right to tell Scotland it can't hold that vote?
Clive Bull on LBC.
All this week, LBC is running a special report on child protection with the Department for Education. Listen to Sheila Fogarty from 1 p.m. as she talks to experts and explores the role individuals can play in protecting children and young people from abuse and neglect. Together, we can tackle child abuse. If you think it, report it. For more information, head to lbc.co.uk.
Are you confused about PPI? At PPI Hotline, we want to give you the facts. There is absolutely every reason to check you had PPI. Even if you think you never have, we can help you find out, as you could be owed thousands. And now there's a deadline. We just need the name of the bank you've had loans or credit cards with, and we'll check for free. So find out now if you're owed by texting WIN to 83222.
PPI Hotline. Text WIN to 83222.
I'm James. I'm in year 10. Last term we watched a film about penguin behaviour in maths. But weirdly, it helped me get how probability works. Random.
The whole class thought it was random. I used a penguin documentary I saw to explain probability models. James laughed the most, but his grades improved the most too. I teach year 10. I'm Miss Ogan.
Apply now, and you could get a £25,000 tax-free bursary to train as a teacher. Search Get Into Teaching. Subject to eligibility. Selected subjects only.
Divorce. It threatens the things you've worked hard for in more ways than you can imagine. Your home, savings, pension, and most of all, your relationship with your children. Don't let divorce cost you any more than it has to. Cordell & Cordell is dedicated to helping men in matters relating to divorce. Call now on 0330 60 60 161 or visit cordellcordell.co.uk. Office in central London. A partner men can count on.
The secret's out. Ray Morris Automatic Cars have been selling cars for over 50 years. With ultra-low mileage automatic cars from £5,000 to £25,000, they have the make and model to suit your budget. Ray Morris Automatic Cars in South East London, 10 minutes from the Dartford Tunnel. With over 300 automatic cars actually in stock, buy one today and drive it away. AutomaticCarSpecialist.com, the not-so-secret home of automatic cars.
Zingflowers.com, fresh, hand-tied bouquets with easy online ordering.
Zing flowers are amazing every time.
Let's talk about you. The I'll walk tomorrow you. The go on, I'll have a second helping you. The give us a minute love you. The heart disease you. So how about the enough is enough you? Start the fight back to a healthier you. Join over 1 million people who've taken the 1U health quiz. See how you score. Search 1U.
The Nigel Farage Show, live from Brussels, only on LBC.
Brexit tough guy David Davis has given some of us on the Leave side slight collywobbles when he said that immigration could possibly even go up after Brexit, depending on demand within the UK economy. And I'm asking Leave voters tonight to call me and to ask them this question. If immigration did increase, would you feel betrayed? Frank on Facebook says, if migrants have skills, great. If not, then we should be able to say bye-bye. Well, Frank, we're not actually talking about anyone that came here legally during that period being told they're not welcome any longer. What we are talking about, though, is a system, and I think, it has to be a work permit, a point system, whatever the British government chooses to adopt. But you're absolutely right. We want people with skills who will speak English, who will integrate, who will get on in our community. And what we don't want is uncontrolled, mass, unskilled migration, which drives down wages, changes communities, puts massive pressure on, even getting a GP appointment, let alone your kids getting a house. And I fully accept that not everybody who voted Brexit did so to reduce immigration numbers, but I have a feeling the vast majority did. Brendan in Nottingham, were you one of those people who voted because you wanted to get numbers down?
Absolutely, Nigel. More to the point, I wanted us to have a system that allowed quality incoming immigrants, basically. We don't need unskilled immigration. We have enough unskilled, unemployed people already. I mean, a lot of people who support immigration, and they try and make you feel guilty if you voted leave. They say, oh, but these people that have come from European countries have been hard-working and they're net contributors. Can I just say a couple of things, Nigel? First of all, whatever a hard-working, tax-paying immigrant pays in tax is more than lost and gobbled up by the number of British people who are unemployed who could and should be doing that job. Basically, you can say, OK, I put this much in, I put that much out, therefore I'm a net contributor. But that net bit extra won't be a splash on the cost of an unemployed person who's claiming benefit and housing benefit that should be doing your job and is laughing their backside off because they don't have to. Now, secondly...
Yeah, and there's healthcare costs too, aren't there, Brendan? And if they've got children, there's education costs. So, I take the general point you're making.
Right. Now, the other thing is, and this is a point I'd like to make, Nigel, is people keep saying about we need immigration, da-da-da-da-da, because there's a growing ageing population. Can I please point out to those people coming to this country won't one day be pensioners themselves.
Yeah, quite right. Quite right.
Then? Even more immigration to pay for the pensioners, and then even more immigration to pay those pensioners.
Yeah, and actually there's another issue here, Brendan, that everyone talks about the gross domestic product, and if we didn't have immigration running at these numbers, the economy would not be growing, we would, our growth would reduce by 0.1% every year. But what about the quality of life? If we go on the current numbers, we're heading towards 70, 75, 80 million. Will that be, on our very crowded island, a nicer, better place to live? I really don't think so. And I don't think money, Brendan, is the only measure of this. Do you?
The conglomerates won't mind, because most of these conglomerates who like uncontrolled immigration so they can actually press wages, you've got wage suppression, that most of them don't even live in the country. They're tax avoiders, so they won't care.
No, Brendan, I completely get the points that you're making, and thank you. Ian in Beaconsfield. Ian, would you feel betrayed if the immigration numbers went up post-Brexit?
Nigel, absolutely, yeah. And, I was going to cover lots of points that people have already covered, so I'll focus on one which most people don't delve in too much into, which is housing and banking. Basically, the reason the Tory government want mass immigration is because, for all the usual reasons, but because it pushes house prices up. And if everybody is stretched to the limit in terms of upkeeping their mortgages, this serves the banks very well. They're making trillions and trillions and trillions of it. And it's all, the people who own the banks are all mates with the Tories, etc. But furthermore, it's a form of social cleansing in London. Poor people and working people and normal people like myself just can't afford to live here anymore, and it's insane. And so, the fact that they're going to backpedal on this comes as no surprise whatsoever. Now, I became a Corbynite not too long ago because I thought he was our only chance, really, of kind of getting this country back on track. But he seems to, I'm a bit bewildered, if I'm honest. He seems to be really dithering. And sort of almost trying to say, well, immigration needs to happen and all the rest of it, instead of,
You're wasting your time, Ian. If you've joined the Corbyn bandwagon and you expect him to put any immigration controls in place, then you're barking up the wrong tree, mate. You've got that one wrong, I'm afraid. He may have...
Curious thing, I agree with a lot of what you say, but I also agree with a lot of what Mr. Corbyn says as well. But I do think he's kind of barking up the wrong tree slightly in terms of the immigration thing.
Well,
and
but your point, Ian, just Ian, going to stop you because Ian, there's a load of people want to get through. Just very, very quickly to respond to your point about house prices and the numbers of people coming in. You are, of course, absolutely right. We need to build a new house in this country every 4 minutes just to cope with current levels of immigration. And when the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, now, of course, editor of the Evening Standard, said that one of the problems with Brexit is if fewer people came in, house prices would go down. I thought, do you know what? For the vast majority of under-40s living in our country, good. Ian, you had a fair crack. Gary in Blackpool, good evening. Hello, Gary.
Years for last June, and I've waited a bit longer for tomorrow, and I hope I'm still here on this earth when it goes finally through.
Right.
Anyway, do you get my gist?
I do. No, you're going to be a happy man tomorrow, Gary, yeah?
Oh, yeah, I might be a very old one as well, yes. Yeah.
Right.
No, I just wanted to make one point. I'm a bit disappointed with all the pessimists that have been on. Mind you, it was your loaded question that caused it. Obviously, it was obvious that Mr. Davis, he couldn't say much yesterday. We're negotiating. He's negotiating. He couldn't say what I know he was trying to say. He says we'll get a lot of immigrants in May and June, and we'll throw them all out again in August and September.
Well, I don't think he's quite saying that, Gary, and I also worry about the speech that he gave in the Baltic states where he suggested under transitional arrangements free movement could continue for some time. Gary, you're right about one thing. Overall, there's no need for pessimism because Article 50 is being triggered tomorrow, and I hope you have a good, great celebratory day. A tweet here, invest in the skills of our young people. Relying on immigration is not the way forward. So many of you think that, and so do I. One here says it needs to rise. There are more people leaving work than are being replaced. It's demographics, unless you crash the economy, David. Well, there are still unemployed people in this country. Government is now under the imperative to implement voters' instructions, says Joe. Well, you'd have thought so, wouldn't you? Our last call, probably of the evening, is Nick, and he's calling all the way from Cape Town. Nick, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So what do you think? Have they gone soft?
No, I think I agree with your last caller, actually, and several of your other callers, that it's really about the type of people that are coming in and the control to be placed on immigration rather than the actual numbers. But I think most people are going to be a bit disappointed if the total numbers don't at least turn downwards anyway.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, Nick, look, in pure legal terms, we voted to take back control of our country. We voted to get back our sovereignty. But I think the reality, Nick, was that it was a realistic expectation amongst voters who felt they'd been lied to again and again and again by governments on this issue. They thought this was the one time their vote could make a real difference. And that's why we got reports of people turning up at polling stations, asking returning officers, what do we do? Because they'd never voted in their lives. And I do think that if, in the space of the next couple of years, there was a big rush into the United Kingdom from the rest of the European Union, if we did leave some transitional arrangements in place where effectively free movement continued for a few more years, I think people would feel betrayed, Nick. I really do.
I agree with you. I mean, people need control over the debate around immigration, and the reason why people feel betrayed is that all governments in the last 20 to 25 years have managed to hide behind the EU issue so that they don't have to address anything on immigration. And that debate is, they just basically avoid that debate the whole time and just hide behind it. But
and now at least, Nick, we're going to have that debate, aren't we?
Yeah, they can't hide it anymore. They can't hide.
No.
I just wanted to ask you a very specific question, Nigel, because I followed the Brexit thing very closely, listen to LBC all the time. And one thing I've never heard properly explained, and perhaps you can explain it to me now, is that you've got approximately 600,000 people immigrating into the UK every year, 300,000 leaving about 300,000 net. Those are the figures that I've been hearing. Of about half of that net figure are actually people from outside the EU. So there's still going to be high levels of immigration even after Brexit.
Well, Nick, I think the point about the last government is they didn't just fail on their promises. They, of course, couldn't control EU immigration, as I pointed out, for years. But they did promise, Theresa May did promise, she would control non-EU migration, and she failed on that too. So the track record's not good. Nick, I thank you. Enjoy the weather in Cape Town. Whichever way you cut it, folks, tomorrow is a big day. For me personally, a hugely exciting day. We will trigger Article 50. We will pass the point of no return. We are leaving the European Union. Hooray! I just worry that on many of the aspects of it, the government has gone a little bit soft. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow evening in London at 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you. Now, coming up after the news, the Scottish Parliament has backed proposals for a second referendum on